Hari Om. We are continuing with chapter 4, verses 11 on. So the Lord, as the life force within each and every one of us, is lending His power for us to do whatever we choose to do. And He does this to all living beings without any partiality. We have the choice as to what we want to do with that power, either to act righteously or unrighteously. The choice is ours. He would give the power nonetheless if we invoke that. Now the Lord, being so gracious, is willing to help us lead a godly and happy life. And yet, so few of us seek the Lord's way. Majority, if not all of us, are always seeking worldly pleasures and not taking the path of godliness and seek infinite happiness. The question was asked by Arjuna as to why so few people pursue the Lord's way. Lord Krishna answers that question by saying, it is in these worldly matters, it is easy to get instant gratification. When the sense organs come into contact with sense objects, the gratification is instant. Therefore, people are tempted to go after these sense pleasures, even though they know that they gives only fleeting pleasures. Yet, we do it over and over again, hoping that these pleasures will continue indefinitely. And that's the reason why very few people choose the Lord's way. But the Lord is ever willing to help us. It's just like the gas in the car. That gas in that car would help me go wherever I want to go. If I choose to go for a righteous program or action, the car will take me wherever I want to go. By the same token, if I want to do something low, mean and vicious, still the car would take me wherever I want to go. Now, we cannot say that the gas in the car was aiding and abetting in my lower vicious actions. It is not involved in that. It is I who makes the choice. In the same way, the Lord gives us the power to do either pursue the path of godliness or pursue the path of worldly sense pleasures. He gives the power to do either one of those. And the choice is ours. Of course, if we are going to choose the godly way, it requires increased effort and time. And rewards are not immediate. Therefore, the temptation in this frail human mind to go for worldly pleasures. People indulge in pursuing worldly pleasures over and over again because of that. Now, people seeking higher and lower goals in life can be divided based on their introvert or extrovert natures. Meaning, everybody in this world can be divided depending on their introvert or extrovert natures. Of the extroverts, which all of us are extrovert, because we are extroverted out, meaning we are always looking to fulfill our desires and needs outside of us. So therefore we are extroverted. These extrovert people, like all of us, have been divided into 4 types. Can be further divided into 4 types, depending on the texture of our thoughts and actions. Now, unfortunately, the Lord here says in this context that He created this 4-fold caste or categories, and tragically it had been misinterpreted, misunderstood, and people have used that to create this unfortunate thing called the caste system. And some blasphemers, if I may call those people who have misinterpreted the Gita, even say that it is the Lord's idea that people be divided into 4 castes. What they have not done is read the entire verse as it is. The Lord says that He created these 4 castes depending on their temperamental texture and their actions. Now, these textures and thoughts, and those are called the gunas and karmas. Now, the texture of our thoughts, if you really analyze it, our thoughts are determined by our vasanas. So the texture of my thinking is based on my vasanas. And then based on my thoughts, so are my actions. The texture of the thoughts are determined by vasanas. The vasanas or gunas are of 3 types. Now these vasanas that all of us have been subdivided into 3 categories, or there are 3 types of vasanas: the sattvic, the rajasic, and the tamasic vasanas. These are the 3 types of vasanas. And in Yoga Shastra, these 3 gunas are given colors. It is denoted by a certain color. And that's why the Lord says, Chadur Varnya. Chadur is 4. Chadur is 4. Varnam is color. So there are 4 colors of people. This is the misinterpretation done in the early days. When they interpreted Sanskrit, they translated colors into castes, and that's how the caste system came on. The Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Yoga Shastra attributes different colors to each of these 3 gunas. The Sattvic vasanas are denoted by the color white. Rajas is red and Tamas is black. All of us have all these 3 gunas all the time. Every one of us have all 3 gunas. Even the hardened criminal has sattvic qualities. He loves his children. That's a sattvic quality. And even the saints have either rajasic or tamasic tendencies every now and then. So it's a mixture of these 3 gunas that all of us have. But it is the predominance of one guna that determines the temperament or the character of a person. The predominant temperament creates the distinction. Thus, the 4 castes. What are those 4 castes? The Brahmana, That's the first one. The description is that it is sattvic and they pursue noble values, cultivating good intentions, and they are indicated by the color white, the Brahmanas. Next are the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas are Rajasic people with sattvic qualities. These sattvic qualities are that they have a sense of justice, law and order, and they are the leaders of the society. These are the Kshatriyas. And they are denoted by red. Red is Rajasic with a mixture of white, meaning sattvic qualities added to that. The third variety are the Vaishyas, or the trade people. They are also Rajasic people. The only difference between them and the Kshatriyas are that Vaishyas are mainly selfish in nature. They are dynamic and active only for selfish reasons. They do not have any higher ideals and they work for their own selfish interests. And they are denoted by the color red, which is the Rajasic color, with a dash of tamas, which is black. The last variety are the Sudras. These are the labor class, people who work for wages only, and they have no higher ideals. They are sometimes low, vicious and mean, and seek sense pleasures most of the time. And they are denoted by the color black. Now these four categories or castes of people, the divisions again as indicated by Lord Krishna, is based only on their temperament, the texture of their thoughts and their actions, not by birth, as the present caste system indicates. There could be an executive in a bank, or even the president of a country, who could be a Sudra, meaning they work only for wages, for their own sense pleasure, for their low, vicious and mean motives. And by the same token, there could be a laborer who could be very sattvic in his thinking and temperament. And in that way, he could be a Brahmana, but yet might be doing menial work. So it is not the kind of work that you do, but it is the quality of your thoughts and actions that determine what kind of a caste that you belong to. And this caste, these four castes, are not peculiar only to the Hindus or to Indians. It is for entire mankind. There are Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Sudras, even among the Western civilization. In the Western countries, there are people who are of that temperament. So this division is mainly so that for spiritual study, that this division had been decided upon. But unfortunately, it had been used for other purposes, for personal gains. All misunderstand this explanation given by Lord Krishna, that these four castes are determined by the temperament and their actions, not only clears the misunderstanding, but also it gives the true significance as to why these divisions are made. And they are all non-competitive. Each one of those castes are necessary for the optimal functioning of a community. All are equally important. Just like in any society, one cannot say that the lawyer is more important than the doctor or the doctor is more important than a laborer. All are necessary for the optimal functioning of the community. In the same way, these four castes are necessary for every community. The Lord says that He is the author of this, meaning, and as an example, the ocean can say that it is the author of all the waves, all the lather, foam, ripples, everything. He is the author. In that sense, the Lord says He is the author of these four castes, and yet He does not do anything. In the sense, He is not the doer. The ocean is unaffected by the waves rising, falling and disappearing. It happens in the presence of the ocean, yet the ocean is not involved in the formation of the wave and the disappearance of the wave. In the same way, all these happenings, these castes and the functioning are all in the presence of the Lord. But the Lord Himself is a non-doer. The Lord says He is the author, but is not involved as a doer. For example, if I say that I came here by bus, if I say that, it is not that I did anything. I just sat in the bus. I just sat in the bus and then I came here. The bus did the traveling. I didn't. But yet I say I came all the way from there to this place by bus. In the same way, these happenings are going on, but the Lord Himself is not doing anything. He just is there. His presence is just there. I came, but I was just seated in the bus. The sun reflected in a bucket of water seems to get agitated when the water is disturbed or appears dim when the water is muddy. But the original sun is unaffected. If you take that example which we have given many times before, if you keep a bucket of water outside and the sun reflects on the surface of the water, if the water gets disturbed by movement and there are ripples on the water, the sun, the reflected sun, might seem broken up and seems agitated. Or if the water is muddy, then the reflection of the sun would be very dim. Yet the original sun is not agitated, nor is it dim. It is only the reflected sun. In the same way, the Lord, when He is within me and I am acting in a mean and vicious manner, it might seem as if the Lord is acting that way, but He is unaffected. It is this equipment that is acting out in that manner. It appears dim when water is muddy, but the original sun is affected. Similarly, the ego suffers by all its evil tendencies in the mind and gets agitated by the fruits of action. But Atman is not at all affected. Now, action and inaction. This is a concept that has been introduced here by Lord Krishna, to see action in inaction and to see inaction in action is the quality of a realized master. Meaning, you and I can easily say when somebody is active or when someone is acting, moving around with their limbs, then we say that that person is acting. Or if somebody is just seated still, not doing anything, then we would say that that person is inactive. But this action and inaction goes far beyond what is apparent on the surface. For example, Lord Buddha sitting under the tree might seem like he is wasting unnecessarily the public resources of food, water and all those resources, and yet not doing anything, just sitting under the tree. So there is inaction, yet within himself he is a mass of activity. The thoughts are going on so that he could realize the presence of the Lord and then using that divine power to help others. In the same way, an artist, there is an example that this famous artist was seated by a lakeside, and every now and then he would take a pebble and throw it in the water and just watch the ripples that are caused by the pebble. And then he would look at it for hours on end and then take another pebble and then throw it in the water. A passing man thought, what a idler this man is, wasting everybody's money, his parents' money, eating and just coming and sitting by the lakeside and watching, the ripples on the water by throwing pebbles into it. But what he was doing was, he's a famous artist, I think his name, I forget his name, but he's a famous artist, that he was observing the ripples that were caused in the water and capturing that picture in his mind. It takes time. And when he has gathered enough image in his mind, he puts that on the canvas. And once the picture comes on the canvas, it is there for posterity, for everybody to appreciate and admire. So one cannot say by outward appearance only whether somebody is active or inactive. To see inaction in action. In the same way, our Gurudev says, a realized master has already realized the presence of the Lord in him. He is ever reveling in the presence of the Lord. So he doesn't have to do any work, but yet you see these masters going around the world giving talks and helping people. Why? It might seem as if he is active all the time, but yet he is inactive within himself, in the sense he is totally consumed with that divinity. By the same token, somebody who is very active, who is inactive, can be actively working within his mind. So action and inaction, the differentiation is based on the motive rather than the act itself. And action is neither good or bad in itself. One cannot decide whether an action is good or bad. It is the motive or the intention behind that action that determines whether it is good or bad. So therefore, the Lord says, and our Gurudev has indicated, that karma is imponderable, meaning it is very difficult to judge a karma just by its outward appearance, because it is the motive behind the karma that determines what the real purpose of that karma is. And to that extent, the person who does the karma with good intentions will be rewarded within himself, not by the outside world, but within himself, for the good karma that he is doing. Now, man is productive when he is active. Activity is the hallmark of life. We all know that anything that is inactive or that is not responding to anything outward is called dead. So activity is the hallmark of life. It is during activity that a person becomes productive. During inactivity, like when we are in deep sleep, there is no productivity at all. So productivity in these worldly matters is done only during activity. Example, stagnant water becomes useless and it stinks if water is stagnant. Yet, if water is flowing constantly, it performs so many useful purposes. It can be used for washing, it can be used for drinking, it does many useful purposes. In the same way, during activity, you become productive. If you become stagnant, you become useless. So activity is the hallmark of life. Man is productive when he is active. No productivity in action, example in deep sleep. Now these activities have been broadly classified, and we have talked about it before also. Activities can be constructive or destructive. Constructive activities are called karma, and destructive activities are called vikarma. We are advised by Lord Krishna to stay away from vikarma as much as we can and to pursue karma. This karma again is subdivided into three. The nitya karma, meaning the daily activities which we all have to perform. Daily activities, taking care of our personal needs, attending to daily chores and so on. These are activities that we have to do on a daily basis. And then there are activities that come upon us on occasions called naimittika karma, such as a friend of ours is ill and he is in the hospital. I have a duty to visit him and console him, encourage him. Or if my relative, his wife had died, it is my duty to go and console them and be there. Or my friend's daughter is getting married, I need to go and bless the couple. These are all occasional activities that are incumbent on all of us as long as we are in a community. If I am living all by myself in an island, I don't need to do all that. But if I am going to be living in a community, the daily duties called the nitya karma and the obligatory and the occasional duties called naimittika karma are absolutely essential, and these two together are called the niyata karma. We are bound to perform these obligatory duties at all times. And then the third variety is the kamiya karma, which are desire prompted activities. We indulge in activities that are prompted by our desires. Now these desires can be noble desires or selfish desires, but they are the three kinds of activities to be done. An action can be judged only by the motive. If intentions are noble, one gets merits. Now, I'm sure you know the BMI chart. I have just drawn a small portion of that. That's Om, and that's Vasana, and this is body, mind and intellect. Now Vasanas manifest in us. Vasanas are present but are not evident to everybody, nor is it evident to me even. But they manifest itself at the intellectual level as desire. So if I have vasanas, I will have desires. When I have desires, it makes my mind to become agitated. These desires make my mind agitated. And these agitations in my mind would prompt my body to go and seek satisfaction for those desires. So vasanas cause desires, desires cause agitation, agitations cause desire prompted activities at the body level. Now suppose a realized master has exhausted all his vasanas. He has no vasanas, or even the existing vasanas are dormant. Then he has no desires, desirelessness. If he has no desires, then there will be no agitation in his mind. And if there are no agitations in his mind, then there are no desire-prompted activities. It is wrong to say, since he has no desire, no agitations, there will be no actions. It is called actionlessness. But this actionlessness is based on desirelessness. And the desirelessness is because of vasana-lessness. There's a basic difference between actionlessness and total inaction of a lazy person. So it should not be misunderstood. Actionlessness is a sign of realization. If one pursues desirelessness, activities in a spirit of dedication, the intellect gets purified and one gains a new keenness. Our Gurudev says that if one pursues desireless activities in a spirit of dedication to the Lord, then one gets a certain keenness, a new keenness in their mind. And this keenness, out of this keenness arises a new capacity. That keenness gives rise in our mind to a certain capacity to view ourselves as an actor on a stage. When we are doing anything in this world, this keenness in our mind would enable us to view ourselves as if we are acting on a stage, as if we are an outside observer, observing myself acting out there. Our Gurudev says, it is like when I am writing, I am taking a pen and I am writing on the paper. If I can observe my hand at this pen, and it's held in a slanting manner and it's writing, but I am observing all this and it becomes part of the entire world outside, this hand and the pen writing. That capacity is what they are talking about here. That capacity to see ourselves apart from our actions. That keenness will give us an enormous ability to be able to meditate and realize the Lord. And when that capacity comes in, it will redeem us from all miseries in this world. A sage functions like that, and Krishna advises us to do the same. All sages and religious masters, they function in that manner, where they are able to observe their actions and separate that from their own self, which is the Lord Himself, who is non-doer. We are not asked to give up the fruits of action, because in Karma Yoga always says you act with no concern for the fruits of action. So does that mean that I work without any expectation of reward? That's not what the Lord means. We are not asked to give up the fruits of our actions. all we are asked to do is that mental slavery and the intellectual clinging on to the fruits of actions. Why? Because if I am constantly focusing on the fruits of my actions are not going to be good. Why? Because I'm dissipating my energy in this expectation of what I might get by this action. And thereby my performance would be mediocre, and mediocre performance is not going to produce good results. Whereas if I do not worry about the fruits of my actions and I perform my duties the best way I know how, the rewards will come, and I am entitled to enjoy the rewards. But I was not focusing on the rewards when I was doing the action. This is the advice given by Lord Krishna, and that brings us to verse 22, and we'll continue with that next time.
Thank you so much. Hari Om.